Thank you very much. Hope everybody is doing well. We certainly are here. You heard, if you were on early, you heard Chris talking a little bit about the fact that we're getting some volunteers back in, which is nice for sure. So I'm going to jump right into it and share my screen. Let's see. Here we go.
Looks good, Mark. Coming through.
All right. So just a couple things that Chris mentioned. We got Basil Camus of Leaf and Limb talking about how trees can save the world. They're doing some fascinating stuff there at Leaf and Limb, really putting their money where their mouth is. So I think I'm really looking forward to that myself. And Chris also mentioned Gardening in the South, which will be on September 19th in the morning, 9 to 12. So hopefully you'll join me for that. And as Chris said, these are different links, so make sure you get the correct link. And if you're interested in this, I would go ahead and register, because the discussion this morning at our staff meeting was, what can we do if we reach our limit for Zoom, a Zoom webinar, which is 500 people, because there's a good chance that we will get to 500 people. So if you're interested in this and you want to do it, go ahead and get registered. It is free, but you have to register. And if you have registered and you're not going to go, let us know so we can open that spot up, because we have a big crowd already for it, which is great. A couple other programs that just got started this week. There's still time to join them. The first part has been recorded, so you can catch up on it. But we have Bryce Lane with home plant propagation for 8 weeks. Wow. Doing just all kinds of home plant propagation. So you don't have to have anything special to be able to do what he's going to be teaching about. You'll be able to do it right there, on your windowsill, that kind of thing. And also planning and planting a fall vegetable garden in the Southeast with Bree Arthur. Again, that started just yesterday, but that was recorded, so we can get you that first one if you haven't registered for that. But this is really set to really be able to, as you take this, be able to do what she's talking about, really, as we're going into the fall to get ready for that. So it's fantastic talks. And one thing that Bree really wanted to emphasize is this is not just for people who have or want big vegetable gardens, but for anybody who gardens, even if you just want to have some containers or mix your vegetables in with your flower beds. We don't have to separate them, no reason not to mix them. But she did want to emphasize that it's for anybody who wants to grow some vegetables. And if you caught me early enough to see my background, other exciting thing is we've got some brand new 2020 J.C. Rawson Arboretum shirts. You can see this is the back is the 4 images of these fruits and flowers that may look a little reminiscent of things you've seen in the news. And then our gate, unfortunately, closed on the breast pocket. Great thing. But we also have some other shirts and hats and books and things. All right, but y'all came to hear me talk about plants. I'll give the disclaimer right now that it's difficult for me to talk about new plants, because I'm just, by the nature of my job and what I do, I am often exposed to plants long before they get into the trade, and in some cases they never really make it into the trade because, but often I am introduced to plants before they are get into the public, and sometimes they never really they never really make it for whatever reason. Maybe they don't work well in production or something like that. So we'll jump into it. So some of these are actually things that have been around for quite a while. Some of them are things that have not. So some of them are truly new plants. Some of them just be new to a lot of y'all. So a couple that you may know from the Arboretum are some of our redbud releases. Whitewater, the weeping variegated one, has been a really good performer in the landscape. And anybody who's planted one, you may have come to realize that it takes it a couple of years to really show off. First year, it's okay, but the second, third, fourth year, it's just spectacular. We continue doing a lot of work with these. With the first two were Whitewater and Ruby Falls, the weeping variegated and the weeping purple. And here you can see the same plant in spring color, in spring flowers, and then kind of late spring foliage color there. Phenomenal plants. They've been very, very successful, and hopefully y'all are seeing those around at garden centers. I seem to see them everywhere I go. They were all over England when we went on a trip there. Lots of people were growing them, which was nice to see. But we are moving on, and some of these I've talked about in recent talks. Golden Falls is one of our two most recent introductions. This is a very strict weeping form, meaning it goes straight down. You stake it up and then it goes straight down. If you look at both Ruby Falls and Whitewater, they tend to go a little bit wider, whereas Golden Falls, if you don't really help it go wider, it just wants to weep straight down. But been gorgeous. The newest growth has a little bit of a pink tinge to it, coral tinge, and then just that chartreuse gold. Seem to hold up once established. They seem to hold up in full sun just fine. And in fact, that's where you'll get your best color. They still have the lavender spring flowers before the foliage comes out. So all the things that you love about a redbud, but gold and weeping. Not from the Arboretum, but from the from NCSU is Carolina Sweetheart Redbud, which is, I mean, it is just a kaleidoscope of colors. Comes out hot pink, and then you get this kind of white, broad white edge to the leaf, and then the white edge kind of narrows to just around the edge with green there, but it gets all of those colors at once. First time I saw it, you know, in a nursery pot, I thought, oof, that's a lot going on in one plant. But after seeing it in some landscapes fully grown, it really is a gorgeous plant. And the one we're perhaps most excited about, this has been one of the most talked about plants in trade journals. It's in all of the, you know, new plants for the fall, new plants for next year. All the trade associations has been flamethrower redbud. And here you can see the original flamethrower. It comes out with that burgundy and then goes kind of coral chartreuse and then finally full green. Really full sun for the very best color, although it will take shade. I wish I had a little more space so I could plant a bunch of them out. That's not a bad look, is it? That'll certainly catch somebody's eye, a whole field of them being grown. Nurserymen are, you know, they're almost sold out before they're actually grown. So it should be relatively widely available. this fall and next spring, it's being grown in big numbers. As you can see, it's just, there's such a high demand for it that it's pretty hard to get. Now we'll move off the redbuds to a few other things. Another plant that we introduced, we got a little seedling Acer scuccii. Acer scuccii is basically the Mexican version of sugar maple. It grows into a medium to large tree, probably about 30 feet in 10 years, but ultimately you can get 40 or 60 feet. This one that we got, though, in the early spring when it comes out, it comes out this almost just, I don't know, peachy coral color, and then transforms to kind of chartreuse, and then finally green. And by this time of year, it's fully green. We named it Tequila Sunrise. It's not available yet. We have grafted a few plants, and we've gotten it in the hands of a maple grower. Our plant seems to be pretty slow growing. Typically, you would see an Acer scuccii really sending up a single leader, like a sugar maple or something, and going up much quicker. Ours has so far stayed kind of shrubby, which is one of the reasons we're really interested in seeing it once it's grafted, because sometimes plants will behave a little bit differently when they're grafted. But I anticipate this to be a fairly slow growing plant anyway, but it really does get kind of all this color in the spring. I mean, when it comes out, it's every bit as showy as any flowering plant we have in the Arboretum. So really am enjoying this one. Another maple, this is sometimes called the chalk maple, Acer leucodermi. This is whereas Acer scuccii was kind of a Mexican version of sugar maple, this is kind of the Florida version of sugar maple. Often put as a subspecies of sugar maple, Acer saccharum. But Acer leucodermi is a nice small tree. It's very tough, usually grows 15 to 25 feet in 10 years. This one was selected by Ted Stevens, and originally it caught his eye in the spring because the new growth that was coming out was really, really a beautiful burgundy red, much darker than you typically see on Acer leucodermi. And he got some plants going and really liked the new flush, but then saw this and thought maybe he had a nutrient deficiency at first. But this is just what this plant does for whatever reason. It's very light between the veins, so you get this almost silvery white cast to the whole thing. It's a really good tree, and it's slowly getting into production as well. Now here's one that's not so new. We've distributed it multiple times. We've grown it at the Arboretum for a long time, but still it's one that's hard to come by in the industry. It's one we're still trying to get nurserymen to grow. It's Cornus Florida Sewanee Squat, which makes a low, kind of wide spreading, really more of a shrub than a tree. So this is our native flowering dogwood, Cornus Florida, the same one you see in woods around here, the same tree that is our state flower, I think. But it's growing kind of as a shrub form. I think it is exceptionally showy because the flowers, sometimes on flowering dogwood, those petals don't overlap. They're a little bit smaller, not true petals, but the bracts there are a little bit smaller, but these really overlap really well. So you get these very full looking flowers, and it flowers heavily. See, it's really covering the plant. Seems to be a little later most years than a lot of the other dogwoods. You know, usually you'll see the dogwoods flowering really before the leaves have emerged at all, but you can see the leaves are starting to emerge there. It gets pretty good fall color. It often gets very good fruit set. It's got pretty good powdery mildew resistance. Not perfect, not like some of the new tree introductions with really perfect powdery mildew resistance, but very, very good resistance. I think it's just a great little plant. We've never had any problem with it. It's grown well. We've had trees fall on it and break it apart, and it's regrown. We've propagated it and distributed it. It's just great, and it's one of those plants that we're still pushing on the nursery industry to try and get out. And it's a plant that there'll be a new plant breeder joining us in January, and this is one of those plants that I've thought, you know, this might be an interesting one to use in some breeding and see if we can get, you know, better powdery mildew resistance, maybe better fall color, maybe get some other characteristics from some other dogwoods in here, really to dress it up, make a pink one, that sort of thing. Another one that's been a really good introduction from the Ralston Arboretum is this dwarf mounding viburnum obovatum Ralston hardy. Viburnum obovatum is a southeastern native viburnum. It grows mostly South Georgia to Florida. Maybe gets up a little bit into South Carolina, but I'm not 100% certain on that. And in the wild, it is this big, rangy shrub, kind of thin and scraggly, white flowers in May. It is not a good garden plant. But in 2007, when we had the 100-year drought here and things were really suffering, especially viburnums, Viburnum obovatum was one that just sailed through. It had no problem at all with drought, which makes sense since it grows kind of in sandhill kind of areas in the southeast. So we had a dwarf one, which was much different from the other plants that are in the trade. And we got with actually the Johnston County Nursery Marketing Association. You did a good job on that, Chris, up front. The group I was talking to earlier today, and introduced this plant. It makes a little low shrub, 3 to 4 feet tall, maybe about as wide or a little wider. In usually April or May, it covers itself in flowers like this. But then it will continue to put out flowers here and there almost 12 months of the year. It really seems to almost always have some flowers on it. During the winter, the foliage goes kind of a plum purple. If it's a very cold winter, it will lose a fair amount of its foliage, but it holds its foliage actually better than the other dwarf forms that are out there, which is one of the reasons we named it Ralston hardy. It's a great pollinator plant. People are really liking it. If you want to see a bunch that were just planted, if you are in Raleigh and you drive down Hillsborough Street where they redid the landscape in front of the Hunt Library, they have planted a bunch of these out there. I think the university has really jumped on board with it, and our neighbors over in Chapel Hill, they've been very excited about it. Nurserymen are growing a lot of these. They've been just really pleased with them. It will sucker some, like a lot of these plants from the sandhills. So, you know, you can cut those suckers out, or if you've planted a bunch, one of the ways this is being used is kind of as a tall non-walk-on ground cover, a shrub ground cover, you know, in corporate situations, commercial buildings where you plant a whole bunch of them. And, if we can convince the landscapers not to keep pruning them into little mounds, but to just let them go, eventually this would really fill in a whole area, and you'd never have to worry about remulching or weeds or anything else, because it would really fill in that whole area. But it takes it a while before it really starts suckering or anything. So it's not a nuisance in the garden for sure. Elysiums, another couple from Tom Ranney up in the mountains, like that Carolina Sweetheart redbud. These are two elysiums, star anise or star bush. I think they're trying to really put the common name star bush on these. These are hybrid elysiums. Elysiums we have them native here with us down through Florida. They're native to Mexico, native to Asia, and it does include Elysium verum is the true star anise that you cook with. You cannot cook with these. They're not edible. Please don't try. They're great plants. They're evergreen. They have showy flowers, but the problem with most Elysium is they get to be great big plants, and people don't necessarily want great big plants. So Tom worked to breed genetic dwarfs. So these are dwarf forms of Elysium. They're hybrids. So we have Scorpio, which has these red-pink flowers, and the flowers are really show off very well on it. They kind of stick out. Now, it's not an azalea. It's not going to be, cover itself and be entirely pinky red. It's going to be, and I should say, these pictures are not great. It is more red than this shows, but they're going to show a lot. And what's more, these hybrids will rebloom throughout the season. So they have Scorpio, which is the red, and then Orion, which is the white. And the other thing about Elysium is they are as close to deer-proof of a flowering shrub as you can get. So evergreen, I never want to say something is deer-proof, but they're as close as you're going to get to deer-proof anyway. And they only grow to about 4 or 5 feet in 7 or 8 years. So very manageable size. You can plant them in shade. You can plant them in full sun. Tom had them growing out on a hillside that was very, very dry. But Elysium range from dry spots to kind of lowland, bottomland forests where they might be in kind of soggy soils for parts of the year. So really adaptable plants and very, very easy. They're great things. Now, if that's too big for you, there is the little dwarf swamp hobbit, which only grows about 18 inches tall and about 30 inches wide. So really more of a little pancake, but it has full-size leaves and full-size flowers, which are pretty cool. Flowers sometimes get a little bit hidden by the foliage. And I did discover one in my yard was having a problem that I'd never seen on Elysium before, and that was that slugs were eating the flowers. So there is a drawback to having a plant this tiny, is that the slugs can reach the flowers. But it's a neat little plant. It is taking a long time to get into production because, if you had this plant, you could take a cutting right here, a cutting right here, a cutting right here, maybe a little later in the season, a cutting here. And then you have to grow those out and, take more cuttings and more cuttings to just get yourself up to, 500 saleable plants. It would take a while. So it's taken some time to bulk up numbers on this. Another native, Elysium floridanum, is southeastern native. Another southeastern native is our oak leaf hydrangea. This is one that has the lovely name Turkey Heaven, really selected for these very full double flowers. every bit as good as Harmony, if you're familiar with Harmony, with the really full, dense flower heads. It was found on Turkey Heaven Mountain in Alabama. That's why it has that name. And once a plant has a name like that, it has that name. But it has large, really large foliage compared to a lot of oak leaf hydrangeas. And when we got this in the hands of some nurserymen, what got them very excited was less the massive flower heads, but more that in nursery production, under irrigation, the foliage in fall stays clean. So there are quite a few nurserymen in the area who don't grow oak leaf hydrangeas, because if they haven't sold them all in the spring and they've got them in the fall and somebody comes to look at them, they won't buy them because they have all kinds of leaf spot and everything on them, which is, it's not a problem. It's not a disease or anything that affects the plants. They just kind of look ragged. They've lost a lot of leaves. They don't look good in the fall. But this Turkey Heaven looked great. Now, it may get sold under they call a marketing name, not trademarked, but just a marketing name like Carefree Cloud because of that. But that's one that still might get introduced. We're still working on that. Might get introduced through the Johnson County folks, but it's a good plant either way. Now, our other native hydrangea is Hydrangea arborescens. Tom Ranney got to work on this and created the first pink mophead Hydrangea arborescens. There had never been one. There had been some that had the fertile flowers, which are just little tiny things that were pink in the middle, but never a mophead type, Annabelle type with pink flowers. So the first one that came out was Invincible Spirit. And Tom licensed this to a big flowering shrub producer, probably the largest in the country, to work with this plant. And they sold them all in a pink pot. And for every plant sold, $1 went to breast cancer research. And I think it was last year, although time flies, it may have been the year before, they had reached $1 million that had gone towards breast cancer research from this plant, which is pretty darn incredible. So, but of course he didn't stop there, because that's a nice pink, but it's kind of pale. But there's kind of a more close-up of Invincible Spirit at its darkest stage. And he bred one, and you can see this has very small sterile flowers there, whereas this one has very much bigger ones. This one went in the Incrediball series, Incrediball Blush, so much bigger flower heads, bigger individual flowers, bigger flower heads. That the Incrediball, the white one, is pretty amazing. Incrediball Blush is even better. And of course, didn't stop there. We wanted to get it really dark pink. And so there's an Invincible Ruby, which is both darker pink and with larger florets than the original Invincible Spirit. So really just some fantastic breeding on that front. So now we're going to shift gears, talk about some other things, some odder things that you may or may not have come across. We know ficus is a fig. That's, the edible figs. We know what those look like. And you may know creeping ficus, the little vine that, you can crawl up buildings and things like that. But there are a lot of shrubby ficus, many of which we're finding have some hardiness to them. And one that's perfectly hardy for us is this ficus Gaspariniana. I always want to put an extra IN in there. Variety laceratifolia. It makes this beautiful shrub. It is a deciduous plant, or at least semi-deciduous. Usually loses most of its leaves. Sometimes in a cold winter, maybe even dies back to the ground. But it makes this very nice upright shrub with almost like a thinner textured aucuba leaf. It's got the serrations around the edges of the leaf. But it's sometimes called Christmas berry because all along the stems, in getting towards Christmas, when it usually still has leaves on there, it forms these little figs which will turn bright red on the plant. So it'll have red decorating all kind of through there. I'm always asked, are they edible? And they are edible in the sense that they won't kill you. They do not taste good, so I would avoid eating them. But I find this a really nice little plant. Is it going to be, flying off the shelves at Lowe's? I doubt it, but it is a pretty cool little thing, and it does grow in a pretty fair amount of shade as well as sun. Biggest I've seen them are about 6 feet tall. I don't know if it's going to go a whole lot taller than that, especially here. Another one that we're really excited about, and nurserymen are getting pretty excited about. It's a little bit slow to get this going in propagation, so it's going to take us a little bit of time, but it's this Euonymus shensianus beniyako. Beniyako means red kite. Ours is growing as a multi-stemmed plant, but this one in Japan, where we got it, is growing just, a single trunk, beautiful straight thing. The fruit are the main reason you grow it. They can be 3 to almost 4 inches across, although ours has never gotten that. It may be a case that if we went back and if we were to grow it as a single stem plant, maybe it would push more into the fruit and it would get larger, because ours tend to be in the 2.5 inch range from tip of wing to tip of wing, across. But I also like it in the spring, and I don't have a good picture of it because it's almost impossible to take a picture of, but all these long stalks that hold the fruit, in the spring, those long stalks, which are this pale green in the spring, have a tiny little green flower at the end. And it looks like somebody has just strung like lime green tinsel all over this plant. And, it's something that you have to be close to the plant to appreciate. You're not going to see it from a distance, but man, I do think it is really nice. A beautyberry, a Japanese beautyberry, and this is one we've been growing for a while, and it is available in the trade. Since Americans don't like Japanese names, it's being sold. I think I've seen it under 2 different names. I think Wine Spritzer, I know, is one. I can't remember the other one. We think Shiji Murasaki is the correct name. But we planted our plant. We had 2 plants. We planted one in the shade, and it did very well. And we planted one in full sun where we never water. And this is the one in full sun in the middle of summer. It does not burn for us. It grows great. The new growth comes out almost white with just a little bit of green speckling, and gets more and more and more green speckling as it gets older. But then it's got this red through the veins of the young growth and young stems. It's been fairly upright for a Calicarpa. I wonder sometimes if it's a hybrid with Calicarpa quangtongensis. That upright habit and that purple look like quangtongensis. Doesn't really grow like a Calicarpa japonica or a Calicarpa dichotoma, which is what it was originally released as. I think it may be a hybrid there, but beautiful. Now, one of the reasons you grow Calicarpas typically is for their fruit production. We have not seen much of, if any, fruit on our plants. It just does not seem to fruit very well. Could be another indication of it being a hybrid. but it also doesn't flower almost at all. So I keep hoping 1 year everything will be right and it'll just burst into flower and then into fruit, and the fruit will be purple. But I have a feeling the fruit will probably be white on this if it does fruit. But I just think it's great, and it grows very quickly for me. For something as variegated as it is, I really like this. Another variegated plant. We're getting into the variegated plant section, in case you couldn't tell. Is this Camellia japonica, Koshi no Fubuki. Every time I use this plant, I always think, man, I need to get pictures of it at other times of the year, because this is an odd plant in that it will typically flush first with this broad white edge around the leaf, and then it'll flush later in the season, and it'll be more of a dappled splattering of white rather than a margin, which is kind of weird for the plant. It's got a pink flower. It's, nothing to write home about, but with foliage like that, who cares? That's going to light up a dark spot in your shade garden, your woodland garden. Such a cool plant, and love that it's in commerce here in the U.S. You gotta search around for it, but you can find it. We saw this in Japan, and the nursery owner would not sell it at any price. And I was with somebody who kept offering more and more. But I think the next time they went over, it was being grown all over the place, which often happens in Japan, that you'll see a plant 1 year and it's very rare, and the next year you'll see a bunch of it, and the next year you won't see it again ever. So got to get it while the getting's good, and that one is good. Daphne odora. This is Nakafu. This one with this kind of 3-part variegation, darker green around the margin, and then a lighter, almost white in between, and then the center, silvery green. I love it. It's got typical Daphne odora flowers during winter. You have the very fragrant, you have pink buds open to very fragrant white, lightly pink flowers. Just spectacular. We propagate this and have distributed it. We're propagating another variegated one called Wild Winter. I was told we have a bunch of good cuttings going in the nursery, which I was excited about. So I love these guys. And if you plant them where the soil is well drained, or doesn't have any excess moisture, on a hillside, right up next to a tree, plant them young and plant them small, and they'll live for quite a long time. And quite a long time, I mean 8 years rather than the typical 5. So just, you don't want them to sit in excess moisture or to be in too rich of a soil. Oh, this plant, Be Still My Beating Heart, one of my favorite plants, Lindera umbellata togarashi. This is a name that was applied to this plant here in the US because everybody in Japan said it didn't have a name. If it does, we'll get it switched. But so this is a spice bush. It's a deciduous spice bush, so it loses all of its leaves. In fact, this picture shows it in flower. I don't have a close-up of the flower, but if you look in here, these are all the yellow flowers. And it'll sometimes start flowering before the leaves come out, but usually the leaves are coming out as it's flowering. And it has that great chartreuse look, but if you get up closer to it, you will see it is chartreuse with green specks all over it. And I don't know about you, but that is one of the just most delicious looking things I've ever seen. I absolutely love the way this looks. It was getting big for the lath house where it was growing, so we moved it right down by the entrance to the McSwain building, so I can see it every time I come in and out of my office, and I just love the plant. It's actually been one of the easier ones for us to root cuttings of, which doesn't mean it's easy, but linderas can be tough. We have had success with this. We need to do some more because I don't have it in my garden, and boy, I'd sure like it. But really, I think one of the finest variegated plants around. We brought it back from Japan multiple times and didn't get it to live until finally a trip in 2007. We got plant to live, and it is doing fantastic. Another one, if you hear at a lot of my talks that you may have heard me talk about before, this is Osmanthus fragrans, Quianon guife. Excuse my Chinese pronunciation, but it is an osmanthus that comes out hot pink and then goes white and then green. I planted one out in full blazing sun, just about the sunniest spot I could get, to see what it would do, see if it would burn, and it doesn't. It actually has color before it goes all green for close to 8 weeks in the spring, and now in the fall it's pushing out a little bit. In late summer it's pushing out a little bit new growth, so I'm getting this pink again on it. So really, really nice. Planted in shade, it does the same thing. The white doesn't last quite as long in shade, but you still get this kind of 3-color effect. I'm finding that as I'm watching some nurserymen grow this, that when the plant is really pushed hard with fertilizer and water, it tends to green more, which is fine for them trying to get to a good size. But it sometimes takes maybe a year or two in the ground to really settle in and really start showing off all of its great color. And Daphnophyllum mountain dove, one of the most asked plants in the Arboretum. We are getting close to having this guy figured out in terms of grafting. Although this past year's grafting was a miserable failure. We've got more seed to sow, so we can try more of it. And we're going to keep pushing at it so that this becomes available. And there are other variegated ones, and they just don't root. So we're still working with it, but I have a feeling that in the next couple of years, this is going to be pretty widely available. You can sometimes get it from Nurseries Caroliniana down in North Augusta, South Carolina, but he usually has very, very limited numbers to sell because it's difficult to graft. Oh, and gold plants. I had a professor who said gold plants are all just really tacky and nobody should ever plant shrubs or trees that are gold. I agreed with him because I was smart enough to get an A in the class, but in my heart, I knew I was tacky. I always knew it. And I love this. I often tell the story. This is the first plant we visited in a nursery in Japan, was this Ilex integra ogon. Ilex integra doesn't have any spines on the leaf. And in spring, it comes out just this glorious gold. And the whole thing is just solid gold. Greens up over the summer, but it holds color for a pretty good long time. If you see it and it's upright, that's the female form. So this is the female form. It's more rounded. It's the male form. We don't currently have the male form here at the Arboretum planted out, but we hope to soon. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? That is just such a rich, saturated yellow that I love it. I love it. A plant that I always laugh about and say that, you know, I've grown more gardenias that had yellow leaves than I've grown gardenias that have green leaves. It's just that none of them were supposed. This plant, Ogon nohana, which is also sold as gold doubloon, but during the late summer, from midsummer all the way through winter, and then spring with the early growth, it is amazing. So it's really bright when the new growth comes out, but then over winter, it's a plant that it has the fully double gardenia flowers, not the single ones, but those really nice fully double ones that look like roses. I have grown to love this plant and have it in a prominent spot at my own home. We've got one in a prominent spot as you come into the Arboretum, as you walk from the visitor center to the education center. You know, if you'd ever told me that a gold leaf gardenia would be something I like, I'd have said you're crazy. And interestingly, my plant never has white flies. I haven't had any issues with it. And typically it's a white fly magnet, gardenias are, and we just haven't had that issue with this one yet. We'll hope we don't, but you can sometimes. And another gold variegated plant, cistus, the rock roses. Cistus, not a good plant for us. We grow it in the perfect conditions in our scree garden, and they last for 2-3 years, and we enjoy them while they flower like this with these big rose-like flowers. Those are, 2.5 to 3 inches across. And then we got this one, Mickey, which had gold leaves. So we figured, normally we can, if we pamper a plant, we can keep it alive for 3 years of cistus before it succumbs to our humidity and winter wet and summer moisture. And what do you know? It's 10 plus years later, I think. And this is our plant. This is it during the middle of winter. So this is about as ugly as it ever looks. It would never need to flower because the foliage is so showy. You can see that with the new growth on there, how showy it is, but you can see the older growth too still on this picture. So in the spring, you get those great flowers. During the winter, during the winter, it looks, it doesn't look any worse than the abelias we have going on. And this has, 3-inch white flowers in the spring. For whatever reason, this gold variegated one and then a solid gold leaf one have been the easiest rock roses, cistus, for us to grow, which makes no sense at all, but there you go. Coming into a couple of vine ground covers. Trachlospermum asiaticum, which I love as a ground cover. It's okay as a vine, but I really like it as a ground cover. This Hatsuyuki, being sold under different names by people who swear it's a different plant. It's all Hatsuyuki. New growth, pink, and then goes to white and speckled with green, and then finally the oldest foliage is solid green. If you get this and you plant it, it will not be showy the first year. It may not be showy much the second year. The third year, it'll be amazing. And it is a trachlospermum. It's a vine. It will climb plants. It will climb tree trunks. You can grow it over arbors and things, or you can use it as a ground cover, and it will spread out quite a bit. But there are other ones that you can do that with. This is Ogon Nishiki, which emerges with kind of this orange red and then goes to yellow with some green on there. This has not been nearly as vigorous as Hatsuyuki. It's much slower, but I love it all the same. And then for an even finer kind of textured ground cover or vine, because it will climb. There's some small leafed ones. These have leaves that are only about a ½ inch long and 1/4 inch wide. This is Kifu shiramen. That comes out orange and then goes chartreuse. And Atsuba shiramen, again with that small leaf, comes out gold, but then goes to more green with just a little bit of a gold margin on there, but still starts that kind of coppery orange and then chartreuse and then the green with gold. I love these. They're great as vines too, but I think they're fantastic ground covers for sun or part shade. Another great ground cover, Phlox stolonifera Wheezy Smith. This is one of our native phloxes, and this sucker is fast. It will spread just in a couple of years. You'll have a patch, 3 or 4 feet wide. And in early spring, it'll put up these 6-inch tall flower heads that'll just cover the entire plant. Very fragrant. And so it's good for a shady spot where you want a ground cover. I use it kind of weaving around other plants as well. If it starts to get a little bit too aggressive with some other perennials, I'll just rip some of it out and plant it somewhere else. Very easy to maintain, and it's a native one, but it's really nice phlox. My love for these tacky gold things continues. This is Axminster Gold Symphytum. It makes this huge, it's almost like a big hosta. If you were to plant this now, it would make kind of this mound of gold margin foliage over the winter. In kind of late spring, mid to late spring, it will shoot up to 5-6 feet tall. These soft pink flowers. And you can see it's kind of related to lungwort, pulmonaria, and borage, and those kinds of things. And after it finishes flowering, the top will start looking ugly. All the leaves at the bottom will start dying. You cut off the top, cut back all the ugly looking leaves, and it'll kind of do nothing. And then as you get into fall, late summer and fall, it'll flush back out, and you'll have this mound of, hosta foliage over the winter. So it's great, because if you have some perennials that pop up late, like some of the Sinningias and Simanias I'll show you, they're great for around there. They'd be tacky if they were growing together. Farfugium, Last Dance, this is a hybrid one. It doesn't seed around my garden like some of the other Farfugium do. Really good evergreen, lower growing than Farfugium japonicum, only grows flowers about 12 to close to 18 inches tall, but super floriferous. It flowers more than typical leopard plant, with yellow spots on the leaves. I really like it. And flowers late in the fall, so showy at a time when a lot of other things are not happening in perennial garden. The only fuchsia we have been able to successfully grow reliably outside year-round so far. We're still looking for more, but this is Fuchsia Sanahanth, Angel's Earring Cascading Fuchsia. It makes a kind of a shrubby plant that will sprawl through other things and creep through them and up them. And from spring until frost, it will just be a nonstop show of these fuchsia flowers. And then when it gets cold, it'll die back to the ground. And you assume it's dead because that's what fuchsias do, but then it comes back every year reliably, just as reliable as can be. Sun to shade doesn't seem to phase it. Every year I'm amazed that this is such a good plant all summer long and doesn't have a problem with our winters. I really like it. All right, getting into some of the Sinningias and relatives. These are all gesneriads, so African violet relatives. This one, Scarlet O'Hara, I love. My wife got into bird watching this spring during being since she was working in front of a window over our back deck, and started hanging bird feeders around there. So I made sure to plant this one, this Hydrangea, which has kind of these felted leaves on stems that can grow to 3 feet or so. But it is from kind of midsummer on to just about frost. It just keeps putting up successive waves of these tubular pink flowers, reddish pink flowers. And I planted it for the sole purpose of attracting hummingbirds to it. We don't have a hummingbird feeder at our house. We always have hummingbirds around because I have several of these tubular Hydrangea around that the hummingbirds absolutely love these plants. So, you know, if you want to attract them, these are good plants to get. There are some other ones that aren't quite as good, but have larger, showier flowers, like this pink pockets, which has kind of a pink throat, a pink tube, and then a kind of off-white yellowish throat with cool little lines in there. Georgia peach is more of a rich peach, and you can see that kind of fuzzy foliage, fuzzy flowers. And a lot of times these fuzzier plants are a little less enticing to deer. Deer will eat them, but maybe they'll eat some of your other plants first. Again, you want kind of the more long tubular flowers for the hummingbirds, but they're all really cool little plants. Semania, which is sometimes also called Hydrangea. This is Semania nemanthoides, one called Evita. There's another one that I've fallen in love with called Little Red that is similar. But you can see this is in a shade garden, and you can see how it has spread. They are pretty vigorous plants. I mean, they have these little underground, they look like almost like little worm things underground that you can dig up in the winter. They don't come up until late. So this is, you know, after some of your early, you know, in a woodland garden, maybe you have spring ephemerals that have already gone downhill, and then these are just popping up as those are going away. But I mean, there's no Photoshop on these things. This is what those flowers look like. They are so intense, and it can be used as a ground cover. And I just use it to kind of knit together the different, you know, my beds. So I planted my first one. This is not my house, but I planted my first one kind of in a high profile spot, and it's a little too rambunctious for that. So every year I'll go in and I'll dig up a whole bunch of it and kind of contain it again. And then I plant out what I've dug up in my more natural woodland garden and kind of let it spread around underneath the, you know, hydrangeas and plants like that I have in the woodland. And it flowers just almost continuously through late summer. Love that. Orchids, I also love orchids. I mean, who can't love that? Except my wife. My wife says they look evil. She says they creep her out. But these orchids, these cypripediums, these lady slipper orchids from Germany are really easy, tough plants. Now they're expensive. They're expensive as all get out, but they are really easy. Put them in sun to light shade. They don't want to go into deep shade in a reasonably moist, well-drained soil. And they're spectacular, and they bulk up so quickly. So once you get it and it's got one little stalk, one flower, you plant it. The next year it's got maybe 3, and then the year after that it'll have 8 or 10. I mean, they really do bulk up very, very quickly. So in a few short years, you will have a real display of them. So they're worth the money. They're worth the money. And there are a whole bunch of them out there now. But these ones with German names like Inga and Philip and Dietrich, I found those to be some of the easiest to grow. Polygonatums, again, I love shade gardens. The polygonatums, there are so many of them. This is one double stuff with a wide margin around the leaf. You know, there are just hundreds of these different ones, but if you want super showy, double stuff and angel wings are about the two most showy for foliage. And then they have small white flowers. One that I'm really excited about, though, is one we collected in Taiwan, Polygonatum arisonense, which comes up, and most of the forms we grow forms like on almost a right angle out there. And the foliage, you look at it from above, it's gorgeous with these, you know, that's just the veins kind of where they're impressed, but it looks almost like it's variegated. It's striped this pale green and dark green, and then it flowers so heavily with all these flowers. I just love this plant so much. You know, but that's the less tacky side of me. That's a little more understated, but it is cool. And then after it finishes flowering, all these will be little quarter to half inch size little blue black fruits that hang down under there and look really cool as well. I wish we got seedlings from them, but we don't seem to ever get seedlings from it in the garden. Another great shade plant, primulas. If you want to grow primroses, look at the Sieboldii types. Those are much better they grow better than just about any other primrose for us. And there are a bunch of Sieboldii. This is one called Drag Queen. You can see the kind of frilly pink petals. We grow a white one called Mount Fuji. There are a lot of other ones as well. They come up kind of early in spring. They'll spread to form nice masses. And then they go mostly dormant over the hot part of the summer. And leaves will start popping up again in the fall. And you'll have leaves pretty much all winter and then flowers in the spring again. We found them to be very, very easy. And we'll finish up with just a couple of ferns. I love ferns because the deer don't eat them, and I am learning what it's like to live with deer, both at home and here at the Arboretum, because they're doing construction for 440 widening. And so I've cut down all the trees behind the Arboretum where the deer lived, and so they are now coming into the Arboretum to eat plants. This is a little maidenhair fern. It's got a little bit more structure than a lot of the other maidenhair ferns, but it's still very delicate. And you can see the new growth comes out kind of this coppery color before going green. And then another one I like, again, for kind of filling spaces, because this one is a spreader. This is Onychium japonicum. Sometimes, yeah, I think rabbit's foot fern. It's one of the ones that'll have rhizomes kind of right at the surface that'll kind of, in the wild, would grow up things almost like an epiphyte that are kind of fuzzy, like, you know, rabbit's foot. But this is a great spreader in the garden. If you have kind of a looser soil, in 3 years, you can have a patch that's 3 feet across. In 5 years, it might be 6 feet across, which I love. I love that it spreads like that. It's easy to remove and dig up, but you know, the deer don't eat it and it grows well. Hey, I'm all for that. So I'm going to end showing you what's on our plant sale buggy tomorrow. I showed some polygonatums. Their first cousins are Disporum. Disporum sessile tightwad is a really kind of small growing one, about 6 inch tall, with those white flowers, just like the polygonatum I showed you, and they will spread to form kind of dense mats. They're really easy. Whoop, did not mean to do that. Great growers for a shade garden. An old southern plant, Confederate rose, Hibiscus mutabilis. Get these big pink fluffy flowers. During a cold winter, or during a normal winter for us, it'll die to the ground. And even when it doesn't die to the ground, I usually cut it to the ground. But it'll regrow and grow in a season, 5 or 6 feet tall, and be loaded with flowers throughout most of the summer. If it doesn't die back and you don't cut it back, it can get 8 feet tall. I mean, it can get to be a big old honking thing, and over time it'll bulk out, so it'll become a pretty big plant. but it loads of flowers. Hydrangea serrata Owamachinishki. This is a terrible picture to sell this plant. This is one of, if I had to pick my second favorite, just variegated plant just for looking at a single leaf, it might be this. It's just this delicate sprinkling of variegation on there. And it's one of the variegated plants that people who don't like variegated plants often like. And then it has lace cap flowers that pink to lavender typically. It's a small grower, only 2.5, 3 feet tall. And whenever you see a matcha in Hydrangea serrata name, that means this is one that has been used to make tea. So you can make tea out of it. The mountain species, our mountain native Magnolia tripetala, umbrella magnolia, got huge flowers. The leaves can get to be 24 inches, big red fruits. It's very cool. The flowers flower right on top of the leaves. So if you have a spot where you're planting it down lower so you can kind of look down on it, you'll get to see these huge 8 or 10 inch wide flowers even better. But great plant. I can't believe we're offering on the cart, man. A mangave, not one of the hardy ones. This is Kaleidoscope, is not hardy. Do not plant it outside for the winter, but you can plant it out for a little bit for the fall. It's great in containers. Bring it inside and then put it back out in the spring. I really like that one. Kind of an odd member of the rose family, Osteomales schwerini. It's kind of this mounding shrub with very finely pinnate, feathery leaves, white flowers, and then it has fruits which start red and then kind of go to black. It'll grow in the toughest, sunniest spots. It's completely covered in like silvery hair, so it's always got just a really cool look. You never see this anywhere but Botanic Garden, but it's a very, very neat plant. Southwestern pine, Pinus leophylla, Chihuahuan pine. This is a big pine, 50, 60 feet tall, ultimately. In 10 years, probably more on the size of 35 feet. It's relatively cold tolerant. We haven't really grown this outside much, so we'll see. Put it in a tough spot, good drainage, and see what it does. Might want to keep it in a container for the winter and just move it inside when it's going to be very, very cold, but otherwise leave it outside just to get a little bit of size on it before you plant it out, and then plant it out in the spring. Yeah, who knows? A plant that Doug and I can't figure out why more people aren't buying off the cart. It's this Madurodam arborvitae. This is what used to be called the Oriental arborvitae. They moved it to Platycladus instead of Thuya. This is a dwarf one. It says to 3 feet in 10 years. Maybe a little bit more than that, maybe more than 4 feet. But this is hard to find in the US, and it's such a great plant. In the winter, it kind of turns this really nice bronzy orangish color and then greens back up. I really like that. We used to use these down in Atlanta when I worked at Atlanta Botanic Garden, Madurodam and some other ones, and we would plant like red mustard and things and violas and pansies around it to take advantage of that coppery orange bronzy winter color. And then we would plant different plants around it in the spring when it was green. And then sheer luck, I did not plan this, but one of the Asiatic jessamines, Trachlospermum that I mentioned, Hatsuyuki, is on the cart. Again, don't be upset if you bring it home and it doesn't show great color for the first year or two. But yeah, and you can grow it up something or grow it as a ground cover. It's a great little plant. So those are what's on the cart. Again, you can go to jcra.ncsu.edu/swag to get your J.C. Ralston Arboretum swag. Our 2020 shirts are some of our other shirts, hats, sweatshirts. And I want to emphasize this to everybody right here. When you go here and you purchase, this is mail order only. These shirts will be mailed to you. The price includes the shipping. So that's all in there. So just keep that in mind. And I know some of you are good friends of the Arboretum. Some may even be volunteers of the Arboretum. Some may live next door to the Arboretum. It is all mail order, just for simplicity's sake for us, because it takes a lot of doing to do something like this. So please. So that is it. Thank you for spending time with me. Hopefully I didn't go too long. Not as long as I sometimes do. Happy to answer questions now.
Well, I changed the photograph out for the hydrangea, Mark. I hope the new one is better for you. And while I was doing that, Marianne and Joyce both asked questions really late in the chat. Wants to know how big the magnolia gets.
Okay, magnolia, I mean, ultimately they can get pretty darn big. 10-year size is 30 to 40 feet.
And Joyce asked if the Platycladus can be grown in a planter outside.
Yeah, no problem with that.
And very early on, I think it was Marilyn asked if the maples have fall color, and I know one of them was related to a sugar maple, so they probably did, but I'm not sure about the cultivars.
So the Acer leucodermy, in my experience so far, has had pretty good fall color, not spectacular. Acer scuccii in general can have good fall color, but it seems to really vary year to year, and we don't get great fall color most years.
Okay. I did have some people ask or suggest they ask them right now. I'm looking for them, but if they can beat me to it, that's great. I'm just going through it right now.
Okay, so I have a question about what the plant cart is. So you're a new member and living in Lenoir. If you drove to Raleigh, what should you expect? Well, at the moment, expect to not get into the Arboretum because we're closed. We hope we'll be opening up in the not too distant future, although Duke Gardens has announced that they won't be opening for 2021 at all. I mean, 2020 at all. The earliest they're going to open is the new year. So I want to put that out there. The plant cart on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have a plant cart with usually from 6 to 8, maybe 10 different types of plants. We'll have 1 or 2 flats, so 18 to 36-ish plants of each that we put outside our gate, and it is, most plants are in the $5 or $10. It is strictly cash or check. At the point of sale, there's no change given. You got to have exact change or make a donation to the Arboretum with the extra. But it's a great way to get some plants. And when we're open, that plant cart is inside our gate and is usually is fully stocked all the time, rather than just only being available twice a week. John, let me know if I did not answer all your question.
I just saw a question that Rose asked earlier that I totally missed. She wants to know how tall Swanee Squat gets.
Swanee Squat, So I usually give shrubs in the 5 to 7 years, and trees and more in the 10 year. So since that's a tree that's growing as a shrub, I'll give you the 10-year. It can get to about 5 or 6 feet tall and maybe 8 feet wide at that age. That's a big one though. I mean, that's really doing well.
And the name of the person that was hired recently for the department starting in January for the plant breeder?
Well, I'm actually, he's officially hired, but I'm gonna go back and be a little more reticent about saying his name because he is not working in an academic setting. In an academic setting, they would say, hey, I'm leaving next semester, but he's working in a commercial field. And I don't know that he has told his boss that he's going to be leaving in 3 or 4 months, so I've just kind of come to that realization. So I'm not going to say a name, but we're very excited about him.
Paul asked, does euonymus get scale?
Help me out. Which euonymus did I do?
I think he called it red kite.
Oh, yes. The euonymus shensianus. Yes. So I have never had an issue, knocking on wood, with any of the tree type euonymuses getting scale. The ground covering ones like Euonymus fortunii, some of the shrubby ones like Manhattan euonymus and Calchovicus, and some of those get it really bad. But the tree types of euonymus, I've never had problems with scale. And we grow them here, and we do get scale on euonymus. So we've never had it on those. So
Lori asked, can you get the Lindera anywhere? The little speckled one that you like so much. I couldn't find an online source real quickly.
No. We have distributed it. We will again. I'd really like to get it to a grower who will grow it. I may try and get it in the hands of Pat McCracken at Garden Treasures. It would be just the perfect thing right up his alley. Actually, I think he has a good sized plant that he got from us, and he would be one of the ideal people out in Wendell at Garden Treasures to grow it. So he may be the person to do.
Sounds good. I also commented that you said it could be grown from cuttings, so we hopefully will have May and June propagation workshops next year.
Right, it's out of the lath house. It becomes fair game.
It's out of the lath house, unless you give me a warning on it. Marilyn asked how much sun and moisture for the farfugium.
Syningias, didn't she?
Farfugium.
Farfugium.
I asked about both.
Sun with moisture. It can take full sun with moisture. Otherwise, it's going to be a little on the drier side. Part shade. Doesn't like real deep shade, but part shade is good. For the Syningias, it depends on the Syningia. The more tubular ones tend to like more sun. They tend to have Syningia tubiforum, and is that right? Now I'm forgetting the species. Tubiforum.
I'll look it up. That's it.
And that one likes sun and well-drained soils. We grow them in just average soil, but in sun. The ones that are with like the pink pockets and Georgia peach that are the fatter kind of flowered ones, those want a little bit more of a part shaded, part sun to part shade spot, or else the foliage can get burnt. And then the Semanias, the ones that I showed that were spreading, showed a Vita, but also mentioned Little Red. Those definitely prefer shade and moisture, just kind of average garden soil. They don't love super dry, except for the tube flowered ones. They are all deciduous. Let's see, if you have to keep it in a container to keep away from deer, can you overwinter it? You could overwinter it on a 3-season porch that doesn't go below freezing, sure. But like the Semanias that you're growing in shade, they spread quick enough that, you know, as long as you got it, the deer didn't rip it out of the ground before it rooted in, it would be fine, because it'll spread.
Kathy asked, where can you get the osmanthus that you liked so much? And Marty suggested that Nurseries Caroliniana has it.
Nurseries Caroliniana has it. Yep. We worked together to get that osmanthus in. That was the Quinine guife. That comes out pink and goes white and then green. If you don't have enough space for that, but you would like something that does that, there's an Osmanthus heterophilus being sold as party lights that does the same thing on a smaller, very compact plant.
And Barb asked, what was the name of the ghost maple again?
That was Acer leucodermi Confederate Ghost. And that's an introduction from Nurseries Caroliniana.
And I believe that was the questions, unless someone has one that I missed or another one.
Yeah. I do see where somebody asked about, is phlox deer food? You answer them. The one thing about phlox divaricata is the foliage is right at ground level. So the flowers stick up 6 inches, but the deer devastate some plants around my Wheezy Smith, but at home, but they don't really bother the Wheezy Smith, just because it's much harder for them to eat than the Fats Hetera and the Hosta that are nearby.
Yeah, they just ate a few of the flower buds on mine, and I don't think they spent a lot of time. It was just a few.
And when it flowers, which isn't over a long period, but when it flowers so heavily, that Wheezy Smith, that once it's established, the deer won't eat it all. Turkey Heaven's not the best oak leaf hydrangea for pollinators. It is native, but because the flowers are so doubled, there aren't a lot of the fertile flowers, which is what the pollinators really need with nectar. So if you want one for pollinators, get one doesn't have double flowers. Oh yeah, DH Hill Library, sorry. Yep. All right. Other questions?
It's not looking like
Cornus Florida is the NC State flower.
Yep.
You were getting Cercis canadensis. You wrote Cornus canadensis. Cornus Florida. Cornus canadensis is you know this, I'm saying, is a ground covering dogwood. If you live up in Minnesota and Wisconsin, you'll see it. It's a little low growing thing that forms a ground cover that is beautiful.
I actually paused for a moment on that one. Like, no, that's it.
Well, I've been saying Cercis canadensis.
You did highlight
and the only reason I actually noticed that is because I have a note sitting in front of me to check on some potentially heat tolerant Cornus canadensis that we have in trial.
Now I heard that we had one in the Laugh House years and years and years and years ago that did pretty well.
Yep.
Would love to have seen that one. Yeah, I don't think I even saw that.
I remember it.
Well,
all right, everybody. Thank y'all very, very much for being here. Still one of my favorite days of the week to see everybody. You know, if there are things that we ever talk about in these talks that you really, really like, send me a note about it. And, we're always open to suggestions for things that we propagate, and the things we propagate wind up in our giveaways, on our plant cart, in our plant sales. So, sometimes from request to when we can actually fulfill it is maybe longer than people have patience for, but I love the ideas, to know what people really would like. And I also can communicate that to nurserymen when they come by. So always happy to receive those requests. And thank y'all all. Have a great week. If I don't think I'll be doing any talks between now and next Wednesday. So I'll see you then. Next Wednesday is going to be about some of the plants that we've collected in China that we think may have a real shot of getting into the marketplace here. Things we think with real potential. So it won't be pictures of me struggling up and down mountains like we do, or eating weird food. It'll be the plants themselves.
And Friends lecture tomorrow night with Basil.
Friends lecture tomorrow night with Basil. Yes, I will be listening to that. I will be traveling and on the road, so I'm going to put it on my phone and listen to it. 7:30.
7:30. Thanks again. It was wonderful as usual.
Well, thank you, Linda. It's getting to be you're getting to be the person I see more than just about anybody else, I think.
Yeah,
more than some of the staff.
Thank you.
I apologize for not sending those pictures yet, but I will send them in the next few hours.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent. Yeah, this has been great. Some plants. So, all right, everybody, take care, and I will see you. And order your T-shirts now.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.